But yeah, man, what's up? I'm here with Jarrod Kellar, graduate assistant coach over at Glenville State College football. How are you doing today, my buddy?
Well, I'm doing okay, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm happy to get you on. We have these kind of talks all the time, so I'm glad to kind of get you on and talk a little D2 sports, specifically, obviously, D2 football this spring, and, just about your kind of come up as a player and what you've been going through over the last couple years.
Yeah, I mean it's been a ride, obviously, needless to say.
Yeah, first and foremost, how's your spring been? I know this is, you've had more challenges this spring than any other year, and as has every coach. But, are you guys doing okay with everything? And how does it feel to be back out on the gridiron?
Well, the biggest thing I've noticed of COVID is your sense of time is so distorted. The fact that the beginning of the spring season, it was dead winter, nothing on the trees, cold as can be. And now coming towards the last week of the season, it's hot as can be. The flower, it's just totally inverted. I keep catching myself thinking that it's fall, but it's actually the spring, and I'm referring to last fall as the spring. So I'm just all kinds of mixed up. You kind of touched on the different challenges that we have. And, obviously it's hard enough when it's full go, full normal situation, trying to get 80 to 100 college-aged young men to execute, make good grades, be good people off the field. So when you throw in COVID-19, social distancing, mask, testing 3 days a week, it's been a lot of challenges. You go into a game Saturday thinking that you're going to have, these guys on your lineup, you get the test results back Friday. It's like, okay, well, we just lost our left guard, left tackle, and middle linebacker. So we got to make do. Next man
Right.
up.
And
So just from that standpoint, obviously it's been crazy. Another thing that I think isn't really quite as talked about is the academic sides of things have kind of been, I don't want to say more difficult, but just different. We have kids that, they're not getting that face-to-face personal interaction with their professor. And I don't know if this was the case for you, but it certainly was the case for me. When I had an online class, it's a lot easier to put that on the back burner. You're not seeing the professor, like I said, face to face. You're not getting that extra reinforcement, that extra level of I got to pay attention because I'm actually there. If you're in your bedroom on a Zoom meeting like this, there's so many different distractions immediately available to you. So, it's been a lot of different challenges from all, different angles, but overall, man, it is nice to be playing football. It's nice to be doing this for a living, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
For sure, man. And I think the first part that I'll touch on is you talked about it's funny that the weather is different, right? Because I was explaining to my parents about how the MEC was having a spring season, and we are talking about it's different because normally in football it's hot in the beginning and freezing cold at the end. And then this season
Hmm.
it's like you're starting off and it's cold, and by the end it's you're going to be playing some really hot Saturday games, so it's a lot different there, which I guess is kind of nice, right? Nice to not be playing in the blistering cold of November, December in West Virginia, or
Oh,
imagine Pennsylvania or Frostburg, how cold it is there.
oh,
Um, but yeah, I think you talk about the different challenges of online class alone, right? If you just take out the COVID and just online classes, man, like I had several when I was a student athlete, and it's so easy to, right? Because like usually online classes have like you have work due Wednesday and you have work due Sunday at midnight or something like that. So if you know that you have work due Sunday at midnight, the typical college student, let alone student athlete, is going to wait until 10 p.m. on Sunday to start it. Like that's just what it is, to be honest. I know I did that a lot. You don't plan to be like that, but in the end, it can
right.
happen. So it's so much easier to procrastinate. And you talk about football players who already, they need to be a little bit more inclined and stay up with their studies just because it's such a demanding sport physically and mentally, right? So those student athletes have to be even more particular on how they, stay afloat in both. So, and then you talk about as a coach, right? I would argue that coaches and coaching staffs on all sports have worked harder this last year than ever before with testing and you talk about the day before a big game and you've got three starters out, and that's happened. And I know a couple tennis coaches who found out the day of that half their team has COVID. So you go in with like six guys and three of them are non-starters, in a conference match that decides if you win the conference or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's not even, and that's in football. You got injuries too. So for
Yeah.
you guys, I
Yeah.
mean, the challenges. But I think too, like, does it not? The few people I've talked to, I think you understand a lot more about gratitude of just having a season because, you know, even though you guys have had a challenging start to your season and everything, it's got to just feel good to be out there, man. Like versus nothing, because some people D1, D2, etc. didn't play at all this season. I mean, Ivy Leagues didn't play. I know there's some D2 conferences that didn't play. I don't know if did PSAC play a little bit.
The PSAC, I believe they are doing like spring football, basically. They're not playing any competition games, I don't believe. They
I,
had plans to, they kind of talked about it, but
yeah.
I think it all fell through.
Well, I think COVID just, I mean, still some teams have been ravaged by it. I think Shepherd has like one game this spring with Mercyhurst, and it's being played at Wheeling Island, which is kind of cool. It's like
That's neat.
the COVID Bowl.
The
but
Coke Cup.
but for you guys, I know, you only get 5 games, and even in the MEC, Fairmont didn't play a game this spring. They got 3 straight games canceled, shut down the season. So I think just for you guys and the others in the conference to be playing still, for one, it's awesome, but it's got to feel, you got to be gracious to be out there, I think, because, a lot of teams didn't have a season at all.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, part of being a good coach is kind of finding like the silver lining in any kind of bad situation, trying to be an optimist. So, we go out, we lose to Pembroke pretty solidly, 30-7, something like that. Then you go and you get smacked around by Charleston 45-0, and it really felt like it could have been worse than that. And then you lose a game of state that, you felt like you probably could have had, a couple of things go different here. It's just, if nothing else, you're finding out about who can and who can't, who can do it, who can play, 5 days, 5-day practice schedule, play a game on Saturday, try to take that Sunday to get their body right and come back and do it again the next week. We got all these young freshmen that were really high on, guys like, in state, like Brandon Penn from Parkersburg South, was a stud down there. He's been great for us. Brock Roby on the offensive line from Robert C. Baird. He's been great for us. But prior to, this spring, we were like, can these guys handle it at this level? Can they keep up with the speed? And, like I said, it hasn't been always pretty for them, but on the whole, Brandon Penn's been one of our better defensive players, and Brock Roby's been one of our better offensive players. And, obviously that goes the other way too. This guy that we got transferred in, maybe you think he can do this thing. Maybe you think he can play on this level, and maybe you're starting to find out he can't. And then, you get more answers that way. And obviously when you're us and you're 0-3, at this point, it's kind of easy to look at this like it's just a preseason, like it don't count anyways. But, I'm sure Charleston obviously is playing this thing to win it. So, it's kind of been interesting seeing the different goals that these different programs have had. I mean, Wesleyan played one game and shut it down, I believe.
Did they only play
Concord,
one?
they
2, I think.
they played. They played. Yeah.
Concord. I think that was their second. Did they shut down?
Yeah, and it wasn't even necessarily COVID related. They just said they didn't want to focus on the fall. I mean, they had guys getting banged up. I've heard that their coach said, they had like 5 or 6 offensive linemen, and that's not very many. You're talking about a whole roster for a college football team. It's almost like at what point, is it safe to send these kids out there on the field to play? That's another thing you got to consider. There's acclimation periods that you have to have. I didn't even mention this yet. We got to miss out on like the first week and a half of practice there in February because our team, we had to shut it down, the whole thing, quarantine, because we had a number of positive cases. Right. And, we didn't get to have a single center quarterback exchange until like a week and a half before Pembroke. So,
which is crazy.
Because
a normal season, how many weeks do you have to prepare for the first game?
Yeah, you're talking 4 or 5 weeks of camp before you even get into game week.
Exactly.
So, and that's nothing but going. And a lot of times that's 2-a-days. That's meetings all day, walkthroughs. We had not even a tenth of that preparation time. All right, and when you couple that with being a relatively young squad leaning on a bunch of freshman starters, I'm not making excuses, but that's a recipe for, some troubles down the line for sure.
Well, and two, man, like I just think you got to look at it. It's really showing out. You said it's going to show who can and who can't, but it also just shows like who's tough, man. Like who can and mentally tough if nothing else. Like, and that goes for the coaches too. I think everyone that's gotten through this last year, in anything, but it's just talking sports. It's really showed like who's a dog. Like who can get through all the testing, who can stay on top of things, and who can and show up after maybe they get out of quarantine, show up and still ball out. And I think that talks a lot about someone because it's not easy. And I would say a lot of athletes, especially when you're weeding out high school athletes to who can make it in college, like that just shows like who can really go out there and ball, on a whim,
Hmm.
essentially. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you're talking like you said before, a game in football that requires a week's worth of film breakdowns, meetings, strategizing, trying to get this figured out. Another thing, like let's say a kid tests positive a couple weeks ago, and he's able to come back on a Thursday or a Friday. Well, he's got it. Let's say he's a starter. He's got to start. You got to play him because he's better than the guy he's in front of. But he missed out on all that preparation. So then you're stuck between those two worlds of this guy's been here, he's been doing it. This guy's just coming back. Should we send him out there? And like I said, it's so different. And I think what you said is really great. Who can mentally handle it?
I
That's
mean,
really. I mean, the softies, the soft kids, they're getting squeezed out. They can't. I mean, it's just putting them through the ringer, and you cannot make it through this right now if you are mentally soft, physically soft, all that kind of stuff.
for sure, man. And like I said too, man, I think it's made all the coaches when they come out of this COVID thing, hopefully, after the summer and this is all alleviated a little bit and next fall, let's cross our fingers, is fairly normal. I think it's going to be a huge sigh of relief for everyone. Win, lose, or draw, no matter what you did in the spring, you come out next fall and it's going to feel great. And that's kind of, I try to say optimistic, but you're going to feel grateful for a lot of things because of the lessons COVID taught you as a coach, especially, being a GA coach in a small college, just all the things you learn in general, but then going through it like this. So I think there's a lot of lessons to take from it. But, for you, I wanted to talk a little bit about, a journey. My man Jarrod Kellar went through a journey himself as a player, and we've talked about it a lot off the air. But tell us a little bit about, and I think we can relate to this a little bit. Just being a kid from Shinnston, trying to make it in the D2 ranks and coming up out of the competition we played in a small state and coming up at the college level. I know we kind of have different paths, but for you graduated high school early and went straight to Cal, where your dad was the coach. Just talk a little bit about kind of your transition into the college sports. I know it's a little bit different for you being the coach's son, but it's not like it was easier. It was probably harder in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly that, when you come in as the coach's son, let me just address that. There's obviously the accusations of, he's just getting that scholarship because he's the coach's son. He's just getting that because he's the coach's son, all that kind of stuff, which is a lot of times fair, but I'd like to think, obviously, that I'd earned those, you know, earn that scholarship, earn that right to play college football. And I mean, obviously, I could have gone other places, but at the time, I felt that Cal was in the best position to win on a long-term basis, and that's kind of been true. They've been winning ever since. They won before my dad got there, while he was there, and after he left. So
Yeah.
I thought, that's the best program that I could possibly be a part of that isn't a Division I program. And in my mind, it was like, why try to walk on to a WVU or to a Marshall when I can go to a place that I feel very good about, get a scholarships, and I know is going to be playing high level football that I already know because I've seen it because my dad's the coach and I go to the games. I see the receivers that they have. I see the culture that they built. So, I mean, obviously, coming out of the recruiting process, it kind of seemed like a no-brainer for me to sign with Cal PA. The biggest challenge is, like you said, trying to graduate early, which I did. I was able to graduate high school in the winter of 2015, that January, and able to enroll in Cal almost immediately after there towards the end of the month. And it was kind of an interesting situation because I was still living at home with my parents in Shinnston and driving up every morning with him and Coach Mike Lopez, who was also living in Clarksburg, up to Cal every day, an hour and then an hour back down. So I didn't really quite get the full on college experience. No, I was still full time. I was still taking 12 hours. I was still doing every single team related activity, going through the practices, but there was just a little bit of a slight, just a slight disconnect. I mean, I was still friends with all those guys and I liked them and all that, but you know, it wasn't until that fall of 2015 when I moved in and lived in the dorms there at Old Vulcan Village that, it really felt like, all right, I'm in college now. This is, I gotta find my own way. I gotta walk to class. I can't just, this is where I live and this is what I do all the time now. So, that was kind of an interesting transition. Obviously, early on there in that first spring when I graduated early, tore the old ACL in the third spring practice, in like my fifth or sixth team period drill of my college career, and had the ball knocked out of my hands on a pass play, rolling out in front of me. I see the ball's about to get dove on by a defender, so I try to plant my left leg to get out of that. I felt the old thing buckle up. I could feel it crack. I could hear it crack. And I mean, it didn't really necessarily hurt. I've told you this off the air before, like you mentioned, but it didn't really hurt. I just felt it get really hot, swell up. Definitely tore my ACL. So then there's obviously that immediate big setback, to start. But I wasn't, when that happened, I wasn't super worried about tearing my ACL because I knew, all right, I got time. At that point they had a senior quarterback who had, was big time, was first team all conference the season before. So I knew I had time to try and figure that out. And that fall 15, my first freshman fall, I just kind of sat the bench, obviously, went through the practices, did a lot of ACL rehab on the side, trying to get back, 110%, try to be back better than I was before. And towards the end, I think we went like 8-3, something like that, just missed the playoffs, but overall pretty solid season, feeling good about everything. And then get a call. Old dad gets a call from LR wanting them to interview for the job down there. It's a better program, just as good facility. It wasn't a better program at the time, but they had more scholarship money. They paid him more and there was more support. So from that standpoint, it was, and you can look now, you can see how much Lenore Ryan's winning. I mean, that's obviously a A1, high class organization, program from, and just they dominate in every sport. So, when we saw that opportunity to go down to Lenore Ryan, obviously had to take that, even looking back on the way things ended, had to take it. I mean, like I said, my old dad, he was getting paid more money. He's going to have more scholarships. He was going to be in a better, more talented area, better weather, lived on all the good stuff. So, there was no brainer from that standpoint.
Yeah, and when you talk about, I know it's a little bit, if people don't follow D2 sports as much, it's a little bit hard to understand the differences and why you'd move from one D2 to the next. And it's really similar to D1 in that aspect. It's not really hard to grasp when you look at more scholarship, maybe better facilities, better weather, stronger. I believe they play which conference? That's the strongest conference based on the index, right?
Oh, we looked at it the other day. Me and you, we were texting back and forth, and I think it was the fifth strongest conference in Division II football, which in a division of like 15, 16 conferences, that's pretty good.
Tough.
That's top end talent week in, week out. Our out of conference games were against the GSC, who was the #1 ranked conference.
Gulf South, right?
So not a whole lot of weeks off down there.
And another thing I think you've talked about before, the difference in, like, for example, crowd attendance, like a D2 game like Lenore, like versus a smaller D2, it's a massive difference, right? Like you guys were bringing in crowds of how many people normally at Lenore?
Well, I mean, we weren't that great, Like I said, we won 3 games both my years there, but I mean, heck, even the bad weather against a bad team, you're getting 4,500, 5,000 people out there. And with good weather, or in on homecoming, something like that, big game, you're talking 8, 10,000 people every bit of it. I mean, after I left, they played Wingate, who's their big rival just outside of Charlotte there, close game. They played them, and it was being streamed on ESPN, and maybe it was getting broadcast on like ESPN4 or something like that. But I mean, there was every bit of 12, 13,000 people there. And it wasn't just like that at Lenore-Ryan. I mean,
Every game
every
on the
school
road
in the
too.
SAC,
Yeah.
yeah, every school in the SAC had pretty good attendance numbers. I mean, I was talking to some of those guys, my old teammates at Cal PA, the year after we left Lenore-Ryan, or the year after we left Cal to go to Lenore-Ryan, they were undefeated. Cal went undefeated, 11-0.
Yep.
Smacking everyone, putting up all kinds of points, forcing all kinds of turnovers on defense. And there was 200, 300, 400 people in the stands. I mean, it was sad, and
It's crazy the difference. People that wouldn't really know, but when you talk about that conference versus the PSAC or the MEC, no slight to those conferences whatsoever. It's a big difference as far as atmosphere. I mean, those teams can compete with small D1s, and some of those teams play and beat small D1s, every season. And some of those teams get more fans than a D1 school, the smaller ones.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I would guarantee it. You got schools like Akron, Toledo, Kent State, one of those small.
well, even there's way smaller than that you can look at. What's the small one in Pittsburgh? Robert Morris. They usually lose to a D2 school like every year. And there's a lot like that.
Duquesne, stuff like that. Yeah.
Duquesne, yeah,
Duquesne. I was saying Akron would be happy to have the amount of support that Lenore-Ryan has, no doubt. I think Akron averages a few thousand in attendance, which when they got a big stadium like that, doesn't look great. Lenore-Ryan's consistently getting almost 10,000 now that they're winning the way they should be. And I think it speaks so much more to just the culture of, like, you got the Southeast.
Yeah.
You're out in the country a little bit. These people live, breathe, and die football. And, it's such a big deal. And it's not just football, it's athletics in general, because it's also there in baseball. There's another big one down there. Even the lacrosse, I've been to some lacrosse games down there where there's at least 1,000, 1,500 people.
That's
All right.
crazy.
So, I mean, which is a lot. It's high. 1,500 people for a Division II lacrosse game might as well be sold out. I mean, that's a lot of people for that kind of game. So I don't know. But I would say maybe Hickory, being in a more, a little more dense population, might give it a little bit more attendance than, one thing is for sure, it's a different type of atmosphere. You go to a game you go watch Fairmont State play up at West Liberty, and West Liberty has a beautiful facility. Not taking anything, but
the striped field, it's beautiful.
Yeah, the West Liberty's got the striped field with a nice, beautiful luxury box. They got the nice flower bed in the back of the end zone.
It's kind of cool in the corner there too, because you got like woods all around it. It's like a field plate, like dropped in the woods if you look at it from the side angle.
Yep, but like, you get to that game, I mean, it's going to be a tenth of the amount of people that you get at Lenore-Ryan playing at Wingate, and I'm not going to. I mean, obviously the whole SAC wasn't selling out their stadiums, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a noticeable difference there. 100%.
So you guys jump over and you end up playing for Lenore. Your dad gets the job at LR. What were some of the differences that you experienced from Cal to LR? I mean, obviously it's, football is football, but I mean, I'm sure there was some different things going on, there as a student athlete and just in general.
Well, I mean, like I said, just the amount of support. I mean, I was at my dad's press conference, sitting behind him as he's on the podium talking to just rows and rows and rows and rows of reporters and alumni. And like in the middle, he's talking, he's saying some sort of hoorah type stuff about how we're going to win there. And, the alumni start breaking out into a chant about how it's bear time. And they start chanting. I mean, we're at a press conference. I mean, let me just say, I was at his press conference at Concord, and there was about 10, 15 people in there, little claps, applauses. Lenore-Ryan, I mean, I thought they might as well have had a parade for this guy. It felt like if they had hired Nick Saban, like, I felt like that's how he would have been received, the way he treated us. I mean, they took us out to a nice dinner. They, the night, just absolutely just different.
Yeah.
It was just different. It felt like the Division I program with the support. I mean, just the small details, like getting out of a meeting during camp and the training staff has a little baggie set out for you with your name on it with, what you should be eating and how much you should be drinking based off of some calculations they made, weighing you in this morning. And it is just so crazy how,
It's
you
crazy.
know, like how different that. I mean, like I said, Cal, much respect to them. They're a great program. They've been winning. They'll keep on winning, but that's just different.
Yeah,
It's just
definitely. So you were at Lenore for 2 years. Going from there, obviously, I know you ended up playing somewhere else, but kind of what was your experience there? I know you didn't win the way you wanted to, and obviously, that's part of your career that you probably wish you could win more. But what did you learn from that, good and bad, from that experience, and what did you take with you to the next venture?
well, one thing I learned, immediately, pretty much from my first game was that okay, I belong. I think you look at the first game, my stats weren't great, and my stats throughout my whole career were never really great. But I felt like physically, I could hold up, I could make the throws, I could take the hits. I mean, because my first game against Virginia State there at Lenore Ryan in 2016, I hadn't been hit since about November 2014 against North Marion Huskies.
A
So
little bit of a difference. A little bit of a
no
difference.
disrespect to the Huskies now, but Virginia State is just a little bit harder than them Huskies do.
They're
Okay,
a little bit quicker, you would say.
they're a little bit quicker, a little bit bigger. There's a lot more of them too. There's a lot more of them. Yeah, I mean, but it honestly so the good is that I found out okay, I can do this. I do belong, and obviously, the whole I'm getting free education, all that kind of stuff, obviously. The bad, obviously, like I said, you said, we didn't win like we wanted to and ended up getting fired. And they fired my dad, but in many of the same ways, I mean, they pretty much fired me too, because I was the coach's son and the quarterback. So, that hurts your pride a lot. And it really makes you have to reevaluate, kind of the way you look at the world. And I mean, it wasn't like an existential crisis, but I mean, it definitely humbles you, makes you think,
No doubt.
maybe I'm not as whatever, I'm sure my dad thought that maybe he wasn't as clever as he thought he was. And you got all these self-doubts, all this going on. So that was a big challenge afterwards in the months that followed, really the couple of years that followed, just trying to regain that confidence back to the full that it was. Now, I mean, like I said, I wouldn't change anything that happened there. Obviously, I wish I could go back, and make every interception I threw a touchdown. It was on, man, and we found another good opportunity. One thing Lenore Ryan did show me is that I did belong on that level. Like I fit in physically, I fit in, mentally. I felt like I could process the coverages and see what was going on. I never felt confused by what was going on. Just one of those things, I mean, didn't win. And like I said, the good stuff of there being a lot of fans and the alumni being super involved and the media being super cool and involved means there's more pressure to win now, because to a lot of these alumni that are donating, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to the program, it's not like an investment. They want to see a return on their investment. And they're
Right.
putting all this money, all this hype into this guy who's going to come in, change the offense up. Lenore Ryan was trying to go from a triple option, having run the triple option for years and years and years, and then trying to switch into a more West Coast offense, spread them out, zone running, single back running, throwing out of spread sets and going no huddle was just a complete 180. And obviously, in those 2 years, the offense struggled. We had games where we made plays, but there were a lot of games where we, couldn't get nothing going on. And overall, though, I mean, I still have lifelong friends from Lenore Ryan. Just like you get in any kind of team environment. I mean, there's more. The good overall does outweigh the bad. It's just when the last taste you have in your mouth from that school is bad, and it's really bad, it could kind of distort, your perceptions about them, in the future. But honestly, and I say different all the time in private, but my official position is I have nothing against Lenore Ryan. I mean, it is what it is. It ended the way it did. I wish all those dudes the best of luck. Grayson Willingham, who was just a young freshman quarterback whenever I was there, has turned into a stud, the face of the program down there, playing quarterback, taking over my spot. And I mean, I'm really not bitter about it, at all anymore. A little bit initially, but nowadays, I mean, it is what it is. I wish Grayson the best all the time. He's a great dude. Stay in touch with him every now and again, and I'm glad that it's going well down there for him. I really am.
I think for me, I'm always looking at everything is just about how you perceive it, like, and I say it all the time, but wins and lessons, bro. I think as long as you learn from every time you lose, I think you really don't lose because you're better from it. So I think the only time you really lose is whenever you make mistakes and you don't learn from them. And obviously, being a young person, especially a student athlete, I can relate to that. There's all things we could have done better. If there weren't things we could have done better, then we would have all been 4-time All-Americans, but we weren't. So, you learn a lot about yourself through that. You become humbled, right? We talk about coming from a small school in West Virginia, not the greatest competition, and no knock to that, but not compared to the college level, even D2, even D3, NAI, JUCO. Like, you can't jump from West Virginia high school athletics into any other association and not be a little behind as far as competition, right? You get that from extra reps as basketball and AAU, or if you're a tennis player, you got to play tournaments all summer, or if you're a football player, you got to go ham all summer, reading the playbook and working out like a freak. So as long as you really learn from that, there's really no way to go it up, right? So for you, you're able to take those lessons, and now that you're in the coaching realm, you can help young people not make the exact same mistakes you did, right?
Oh yeah.
And that's really I think that's the most rewarding part about coaching, in my opinion, is helping people see their potential.
100%. I think that's cool. That I should have touched on it. I really didn't. But we were big fish in a small pond. I mean, you were the best tennis player. One of the best tennis players in the state, top 5 tennis players in the state. Pretty much every year you played. All right. And no disrespect to you, but in most states and most environments, that doesn't happen. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
I was, you asked me, I was the best quarterback in the state, but I was at least one of the better quarterbacks in the state. Basically from day one, and 99% of states that doesn't happen. No disrespect to West Virginia, but that's just the facts of the situation. When you have less people, less economic development, you're not going to get as good of high school sports, no doubt about it.
100%.
But when you go in that environment and you're the big fish in the little pond and you play well, you get to college. Obviously, you're aware that the competition's better.
Right.
You're not. We weren't stupid, but you never really know until. For me, my big moment is I threw a go ball to the outside. All right, and I was looking at the safety in the middle of the field. He was in the middle of the field. I threw it outside. It was like, okay, there's no way that safety can come make that play. It was Kyle Duggar who got drafted in the second round. So, but Kyle Duggar, the safety, runs over and picks it up out of the air like it wasn't even close. Like he beat the ball by a couple steps before it got there. So I was like, oh wow, I mean that's a little different. Getting hit for the first time. I remember I was rolling left, held onto the ball maybe a second or two too late. And when that was Philip Barber, that guy shoved me. He was smaller than me, barely even hurt. Now it was some dude who was just as big as me and faster than me, and he just knocked me damn near 3 rows back into the bleachers, out of bounds. It's different, it really is. But it's kind of at the same time, it's kind of fun, like, oh wow, I mean, these guys can hit. That was exciting for me too.
It's fun climbing the ladder too, because like you said, you go in as a high school kid. Obviously, you've had a lot of success. You obviously have a little bit of ego to you. Like, let's face it, anyone who's successful and wins a lot and has some of the best stats in the state, you're gonna come in with some healthy arrogance at minimum, and you come into a situation where you're no longer a big fish. And same for me. Same for, I would say, 99% of college athletes. Maybe there's some Zion Williamsons in there who are the guy from day one, but for the most part, especially in D2, you're going to come into a situation where you're not the guy, and you're going to have to work your ass off just to even be in the rotation, let alone a stud among the conference. So it's a big adjustment, and I think a lot of people who don't play, who were good athletes in high school but didn't go to the next level, it's something they'll never quite grasp, because I just think you have to experience it, because I think it's just so humbling from day one. For me, I was so humbled from the beginning. Like, I mean, lose my first few matches to dudes who were complete studs from Colombia or from Argentina or whatever. And it's just like, it just doesn't even seem like it's possible. And for you, it's the same thing, right? You go from playing Philip Arbor or North Marion, and all of a sudden, your first game of your career playing against Virginia State, they're going to be bigger, faster, stronger. And not only that, but just you go to training camp and your teammates are all freaks in comparison to high school. I mean, you're literally playing with freaks. And it's cool for you because you said you felt like you belonged. And I think a lot of people struggle to find that in the beginning. And I think, that's why some people don't make it. You go play for a Wesleyan or whatever, and you're a good athlete. Making it through that first year, I think, is tough for anyone in any sport, especially if you're not the dude, if you're not a starter, or if you're not even in the rotation. Making it through that first year.
Oh, that's where the most fallout occurs. The most kids that we have quit are all freshmen. That a lot of them, like a lot of these kids, they really have no idea. They really don't. Not trying to make it sound like it's more than what it is, but I mean, there's a lot to it. Almost all the kids that we have on our team, even in Division II, were the best players on their team in high school. All right. Well, that's not the case anymore. Now, all of a sudden, I was at West Fairmont, dominating, starting every single game. And now I'm here at Glenville State, and I'm fourth string behind three dudes that are, in their own head, way better than me. You know what I'm saying? And like, that's a huge shock. And we have a lot of kids that kind of struggle to grasp the fact that there are guys better than them at sports. And I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of one of them to this day. We
are all one of those, Jarrod. If you're an athlete and you're a winner and you enjoy to win, it sucks to lose, and it sucks to not even be a starter on your own team, especially when you're used to being a stud.
It's really hard because you want to tell these kids you got to do what's best for the team. You got to accept your role, accept your role, accept your role. Well, to that kid who's a backup, accept my role. Well, it's like accepting that this guy's better than me. To hell of that. And as a coach, you're trying to find the fine line of guys with that dog mentality, with that, nah, screw you, I'm better than him, and I'm gonna show you mentality. We all love that. Who wouldn't? You don't have a good team if you don't have that. Same time, you need to have a guy who's realistic or at least mature enough to be able to, be patient and accept their role and do what's best for the team rather than do what they feel is best for themselves. And it's that fine line, the line probably doesn't exist. You just got to try to balance it out, try to balance the dogs with the good kids. And it's not even necessarily good kids, but you know what I'm trying to say, that you got to find that equilibrium of, that dog mentality and that good teammate mentality.
Right, and I think being a good teammate is something else that's tricky when you're someone who was the guy in high school, because being a good teammate is easy when you're the guy. Like, that's people don't understand. It's easy to be nice to people and always in a good mood and be nice to players who are worse than you when you're the guy, but then you become the lesser player and the guy that's third on the depth chart, and it's harder to be a good teammate when you're that. Because, you know what I mean? It's just not, your ego takes a huge hit. But I think too, man, you talk about being a dog. That breeds the dog right there, man. If you can climb out. See, I don't know, man, because I've heard, you're one of the first people I ever heard say, and I think your dad maybe says it, or maybe it was one of the coaches from Lincoln. You can tell me if I'm wrong here. But you're one of the first people I ever heard say it's about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. And I've always taken that quote with me because I think it's so applicable in any sport. I mean, coaching always matters, but if you got two teams that are even, coaching greatly matters. If you got a team here and here, coaching can only get you so far, right? It just is what it is. You can't play if you're the coach. So, but I think with that, I think that really builds the dog up. So, if you're talented, that's great, but it can only take you so far. And eventually you're going to get to the next level where talent doesn't win it for you anymore. So just being that mental dog and someone who just grinds it out every day, those are the players that are exciting for me as a coach. Like those are the people those are the players I love, and that every day, like, they inspire me. Like,
We got guys like that right now. That first year we were here, we went 7-4, and really, probably a roster that wasn't, probably wasn't as good as what their record indicated. I think we overachieved just a little bit. We had some obviously studs at the top end, but our middle of the roster, the other starters were not what we wanted them to be. And there were just handfuls of guys that we were wanting to replace. But there were some guys that have proven to be hard to replace. I mean, we got a starting free safety, Dane Lynch, a young man from Virginia, I believe. He totally bought in to accepting. Initially, let's just start from the top. He got thrown into the game against West Liberty. Our starting free safety got hurt, and he was forced to play. He was a little overweight. He was a little chubby, and he wasn't super tall. He wasn't super fast. He wasn't super strong. But, against West Liberty, the quarterback throws it in his chest, and he takes it back to the house for a pick six. And throughout that whole season, he was just kind of hanging on by a thread to his starting spot. And the whole year, we're all dying to replace Dane. Can't wait to get rid of him. God, can't wait till we get a better recruit, And he comes back the next spring. He's got a six-pack. He's been running. He's been working out hard. He's been staying in his playbook. And the kid is obsessed with film. I mean, he worked himself so hard that you can't replace him. He made it impossible to replace him.
I love
You
that.
see what I'm saying?
That's what you have to do.
Yeah. So that's like you really learn to appreciate that kind of stuff. I mean, initially when I first saw Dane, I wasn't super high on him. I didn't dislike him or anything, but I was like, he's not what we need to be, right? And then all of a sudden now he's one of the 2 or 3 better starters we have, period. And this was a guy that we thought couldn't do it, and he proved us all wrong. So for one, that kind of goes to show that if you are, not where you want to be on the depth chart or whatever, that it's not final. It can change. You can overcome it. You can work through it. I mean, it's just like there's other kids like that on our team too. I mean, just, you love to see it when guys just kind of buy in and they kind of surrender themselves to the coaching. That's another thing that he did really well. And just, just the buy in and just sell out for what they want to be and their goals. I mean, it's this beautiful thing to see. You'd love to see as a coach.
What do you feel, Jarrod, about, players and accepting criticism, healthy amounts of criticism and positive criticism? Because I think that's something that's so talked about with today's generation, and not just in coaching, whether it be in the education system, whether it be with parenting. We've got such big problems with the school system in that regard, and with parenting, with coaching. Kids, they talk about, well, back in my day, I was hit with a switch if I talked back, and things are different now. But how do you feel about kids that are able to take criticism and use that positively? And what do you feel about that as a young coach?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's obviously huge, because as a coach, I'm basically a professional criticizer.
Literally.
I mean, I'm critiquing all the time. I'm critiquing your body language. I'm critiquing your technique. I'm critiquing everything about you as a player. So, a guy who's able to receive that well is obviously huge. What happens a lot of times, like we said earlier, is that these kids were the best players on their team. We like to say they were King Turd of Crap Mountain. You know what I'm saying? They were the top of the heap.
Big fish, small pond.
Yep. And these coaches are afraid to challenge the big dog. They don't, these kids don't get coached hard when they're young. I mean, that's a generalized term, but if I'm an AAU coach and I get this random 6'5", 15-year-old who can do windmills, I'm doing anything I can not to run that guy off the team.
Exactly. So coaches are in a tough spot, right? And I feel like it's the same for parents, man. Like if parents are parenting too hard, man, they can get in trouble badly these days, And I think it's such a tough spot to be, especially as a young coach. I think as a young coach, it's tough because, Jarrod, you're 24 years old. You were just a player like 2 years ago. Like for me as a GA, I'm telling kids who are actually, some of them better than me as a player, how they can be better when we're like, I had a kid that was a 23-year-old freshman. We were 1 year apart. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like how to balance that, because being young, you don't quite have the authority and the years. Whether you garner that respect or not, your age doesn't garner that respect.
Right. Yeah, it's a fine line. Like I've been saying, I kind of have that same issue. I'm not when I coach, I'm not one of those guys who takes himself super, super seriously.
You
You
can't.
know, I'm not
You
yeah,
can't.
because for one, I'm young. I don't pull it off. I can't pull it off.
Yeah, it's just
You know,
not.
no matter what I do. Because I remember when I was a player and there was some young coach, like one time we had this guy when I was at Edinburgh. He played with us forever. And he was a good dude, was always like one of like the more do right type of guys. Like, I'm gonna live the right way, do what the coach says. Wasn't a very good player, but his father coached back in his old high school. So he comes in and he starts coaching with the Edinburgh coaching staff as a volunteer assistant, student assistant, whenever he's done playing. And he's ripping into me one day at morning runs for having the wrong shorts on. And I was like, come on, man. I know who like so the young coach, any young coach watching this, don't try to come out there and be Bobby Knight from day one, because you're just going to look like a fool. All right. The
Right.
same token, though, I mean, obviously, I love talking to my players. I love the relationships I have with them. I mean, I like to think that those are, some of my friends. That's probably not the word you want to use,
That's
but
that's another fine line I was gonna ask you, is like, as a
like,
GA, you got to be the good cop in a lot of ways as a GA, right? Because you're younger, you're kind of being trained on how to really coach. You're almost the same age as these kids, so you're somewhat friends with them, and it's the same problems. Like, you're coaching, but you're their friend. Like, you can't really be friends, but you got to be friendly, and you have more in common with your players a lot of times than the older coaches. Like,
yeah, totally. I mean, you know, like it's almost like, how could I not be at least friendly, with guys who are my own age? Like, I know exactly what they're going through, like we have coaches that played football, but they never played football in this environment, in this society as it is today. So they don't get that, they don't have that connection, that link. And then whenever, when I'm coaching, hopefully here in 20 years, I'll lose that link too. And,
you
I'll have
will.
to have my young GA build that bridge.
Yep.
So, like, all the time, though, I mean, we have Rick Trickett here, our offensive line coach, and he coaches hard. He loves his guys and they love him back. But, he coaches them harder than anyone else out there is getting coached. And all the time, I love just being nice to those guys. It's just being friendly, because I know that they go through a lot more crap than the other players do. So whenever I see O lineman, I'm like, hey, buddy, it's gonna. I pat them on the butt. I try to be that shoulder for them that they can cry on, quote unquote, cry on. If they need to. I try to be, like you said, I'm the good cop. What I'm
You
saying, the
have to be.
bad cop comes in, spits in your face, slaps you, backhands you across the mouth. All right, and you're sitting there and you're sobbing, and I come in with the towel. I'm like, hey, buddy, listen, this is what he's trying to say, like, because you can't go back on the message of the bad cop. The message is the message. The goal is the goal.
Exactly.
You can't undercut the bad cop,
No.
but you need to complement him. You need to supplement him, I should say. You need to work in tandem with them. And it's kind of, I'll say it's fun. It's fun to try to do that. I mean, I like, as a coach, you kind of get, a green light to, I don't want to say mind games, but, you can kind of mess with your players in ways that, it's fun. I mean, I'll say that it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's interesting.
Yeah, and like you said, man, you build relationships with players that are so special in their own right, and it's just different because when you're in the trenches with someone and you're grinding with them every single day, all the morning workouts and all those things, and you're just there for the gritty of all of it, not just on game day. You see all the good and the bad, so you just build relationships. When you're a player, you build those relationships, and then when you're a coach, you build those relationships. And really, I think that's the best part about coaching is the relationships you have with players and seeing them grow, seeing yourself grow, and just climbing the ladder, man. I think that's my new catchphrase is climbing the ladder, man. It doesn't matter about where the ladder's going. You just keep climbing it one rung at a time.
Yep.
And if you keep climbing it one rung at a time, every year you're 10 rungs ahead. I mean, you can't really fail, right? It's
Yep.
only when you
Yep.
start going down the ladder, you stop climbing that you stop progressing. But if you just keep moving, you really can't lose. And I think that's kind of a motto for life, man. You just keep
Yep.
going.
You'll end up somewhere.
Yeah, and it's the same for your
Moving
players,
forward, you'll
man.
end up somewhere, you know?
Yeah, man. It's the same for, I don't know. I think sports are such a good not acronym. What's the word? I'm not so good with English. Whatever. It's like a good metaphor for like life, man. Like if you just work hard and continue, and you listen to people that are helping you, you're just gonna keep going further. Like you just really nothing to it.
Hmm.
But it's always a mental grind, and it's always a battle, whether you're a player or a coach, or you're outside of the sports realm. So I just think, as athletes and as coaches of athletes and things like that, it's so important to build each other up and stay positive, because you touched on it a little bit. I mean, you guys are 0-3 right now, but at the end of the day, you're playing ball, you're getting better, you're seeing, who's going to be a dog for you in the fall. There's so many positives. It's like, how can we lose? Like, imagine if you didn't play this spring at all. Let's say you didn't play a game this spring, like a Fairmont. Fairmont's got a lot more question marks than Glenville coming on in the fall. Regardless
Oh,
of talent or who's better or who's worse, Glenville State knows a lot better of who their players are, especially their freshmen, and if their players have gotten better, their upperclassmen, better than a team that didn't play. So I think there's just so many positives to take from it.
oh yeah. And we were talking as a staff, obviously, at the beginning there, we were kind of poo-pooing about having to play because we didn't feel like we were ready. But we were just talking like, you know what? Screw it. It was good. Because like imagine if we came out in fall 2021 and started off 0-3, feeling like the sky's gonna fall and it's more pressure, and
Correct.
we got these guys coming up on the schedule, and it's just so now at least we're diagnosing problems. We thought we were here. Okay, we're actually here. Okay, what can we do to get to what I'm saying? So that is a blessing, certainly. That is undoubtedly a blessing. Just, I mean, we would rather take the lumps now in the spring than in the fall. You know,
100%,
losing
man.
now gives us a chance to try to right the ship.
For sure. And, just kind of piggybacking off this a little bit, I know you guys got West Liberty this weekend. I don't know, this probably won't be posted until after you guys play it, but what are some of your thoughts on that game, strengths and weaknesses of that team, and how you think that you guys can compete with that squad?
Well, we say this all the time, not to be, cliche, but West Liberty, you have to respect them based on the fact that you have to respect pretty much any, you know, funded college football program with full-time coaches that are dedicated to doing it pretty much 24/7 like we are, fighting every single way to beat us. So, there's that certain level of respect that you have to have by default. And the reason I kind of lead off with that is because, you know, when you have young players, they're going to be immature and be looking at the scores that West Liberty had. I mean, they got absolutely blown out against Notre Dame, and then lost pretty badly last week to Wheeling U, who has been not a great program since they've joined
Only
the conference here
only their
over the
second
last
year in
couple.
D2.
Yeah, so for a young player, and even for me for a brief moment, initially it's easy to be like, oh, these guys, psh, I mean, they just lost the Wheeling, I mean, who loses the Jesuit? Well, the old Pioneers need to remember, for one, we went to overtime with the Wheeling U, and just in 19, you were at that game, and West Liberty in 2019 beat the brakes out off of us pretty
Yeah.
much. So, and they're returning a lot of those same guys, especially defensively. I mean, they're pretty much returning the whole front seven. Yet, they lost some secondary guys, but if they're getting to the passer, it doesn't matter who's covering. Um, and then offensively, I really haven't been paying quite as close attention because I'm not scouting their offense. But they got Jack Allison, who was the 41st ranked prospect in his class, a 4-star recruit, playing down there in Miami, Palmetto, I believe. And I mean, high class as it gets. He played at Miami, the U, Miami, for a year, then transferred to West Virginia for 4 years, 3 years. He graduated from West Virginia.
Started in a bowl game for West Virginia.
Started in a bowl game, going against,
Syracuse.
in practice every day. He's going against those guys. I mean, this is high-end football. So, Jack has struggled, recently. He hasn't been putting up the numbers he could, but, you really look on film, he throws a beautiful ball. I mean, the guy is like 6'4", 6'5", 200 something pounds. And I mean, every single ball is just super tight spiral, hits the guy where he wants it to hit. I think a lot of the reason that they struggle is because, he's new. I mean, we complain about us down here at Glenville, how we haven't had a whole lot of time to prepare. Well, he's had even less. I mean, his has been, the quarterback position is so much about building that trust and that faith, and not just your receivers, but in your linemen and your running backs. And, so like, it's really easy to point the finger, at Jack Allison and be like, haha, this guy, he was supposed to be a man and now he's in Division II. But I'm telling you, you got to respect him just from the sheer fact. Like I said before, he's a college football player. He played all these big time games, all these big time places. And, he knows what it takes to, he's seen it, I mean, he was around Will Greer.
Yeah.
He was around those guys down in Miami. I mean, you don't think, he's going to see our defense, and our defense that we have now probably doesn't hold a candle to the scout team defense at Miami or West Virginia.
Right.
So that is something that you have to take into account. I know I'm on Twitter and I follow a bunch of West Virginia fans, and, it's all kind of funny to point and laugh at the guy, but at the end of the day, you got to respect him. You got to take him seriously, and you got to come in thinking that he's going to want to come in and hang up 707 touchdowns on us. I'm telling you, he's capable of doing it. He's incredibly capable. I mean, West Liberty, they'll be ready to play. They got some good coaches, some experienced coaches on that staff. They're kind of in the same boat as us, I'd say.
Yeah.
I really would, because, like I said, Notre Dame might have beat them worse than Charleston beat us, but if you watch a Charleston game on film, they could have put up 80. I mean, it was that bad. So, I'm expecting this to be a competitive game. I think, one thing that we've struggled with and that I've seen them struggle with on film is just self-inflicted wounds.
Right.
Exchange issues, not being able to get lined up, being misaligned, missing your assignment. And, in football, one defensive lineman doesn't fill the right gap. All of a sudden it's 88 up the gate, the running backs, to the 20, to the 10. I mean, so if one mistake can kill you. And when you got so many different variables going on out there, I mean, there's 22 variables on the field at one time. All right. So you're kind of hoping that kids with limited preparation time are able to align in the right spot, use the right technique, go to the assigned area. And, when you look at the mistakes that they've made, it's been that kind of stuff. I think if you look at the mistakes that we've made, it's been that kind of stuff. So, obviously, if we go out there and we play sloppy and they play clean, they're going to beat us by 100. If we go out there and we play clean and they play sloppy, then, we'll beat them by 100. If we're both sloppy, then who knows? If we're both clean, then it'll be a good game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's going to be an even game. And then who do you guys wrap up the season with? Who's your last?
West Liberty.
This is your last game?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to get a fifth game.
No, the old Reed Amos, the commissioner, he wanted everyone to get at least 4 in. Everyone was scheduled for 5. We had Concord last week. It canceled for us.
Did Concord cancel their season after that?
I believe they had to, because they had to quarantine so many players, because the whole bus needed to be quarantined, because obviously they were all riding together. And then, they quarantined for the rest of that week against us. And then they probably just now getting out of quarantine today, so they can't play this week.
Yeah, and speaking of them, I know I talked to you a little bit before, but a few people, because I follow the MEC football, basketball, more so than most people, were asking me about what I thought about Concord because I watched some of their highlights against. I watched their live stream against Wesleyan at the same time while I was watching your stream against West Virginia State. And what do you think about that Concord squad? I know they got that receiver from Martinsburg. What's his name?
Teddy Marshall, and then you got Jarrod Bowie.
Bowie.
The other one.
Bowie.
Yeah, Bowie's the big time
Bowie
one.
Looked like a
Marshall,
complete stud in that first game.
If you look at that game, Teddy Marshall actually had, I believe, more receiving yards than even Bowie. I don't know.
Yeah,
Jarrod Bowie had.
Yeah.
But heck, we're not even accounting for their number 14 for them. He's an all-time leader in like receiving yards or not receiving yards, return yards.
Really?
Kick return. And he's shifty as shifty gets.
Yeah.
They got some skill over there. Their quarterback.
That's a JUCO guy. Their
Yeah,
quarterback.
Yep.
I think is he from Lackawanna? No, he's a Mississippi JUCO.
I can't remember. I feel like Lackawanna sounded right, but I don't know. He's a JUCO kid. He's a big, tall kid. Throws a pretty ball.
Throws a good ball.
Yeah, he's confident. You could tell he plays with a high level of confidence. Anytime a guy's, gunning balls in the tight coverage, and putting him in good spots, where only his guys can get it. I mean, you saw what they did to Wesley, and they put up 52 points on him.
Right. And I know, obviously, Coach Walker wasn't shy on running up that score, which, I mean, it's a spring game, so I don't blame him. But, yeah, they got a solid new quarterback, and he's going to have skill players around him. I know I've told you this before, but I know that Concord program is going to be quickly on the up and up. I know their last time they played, 2019 fall, I guess. They were bottom of the conference.
Yeah, 1-2 win team, something like that.
Yeah, I know they didn't have a great season, and I think that team is going to be vastly improved from where they were at then. And obviously, we both know Coach Walker's pedigree. He's won a lot of state titles, the winningest coach in West Virginia high school football history. So, and he's going to get a ton of talent from those Martinsburg squads and surrounding DC area where he's got some a little bit of a pipeline out there.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it might as well be Martinsburg U down there. I mean, all joking aside, I mean, Concord really is an interesting program because, my dad coached there back in the late 2000s there, 2009 and 2010. And, the previous year in 2008, they went over. They didn't win a game, and the year before that, 2007, they won one game. So in 2 years, they went one and whatever. And then, my dad gets there, they start turning the ship around. All right, and then when he leaves, Garen Justice, who is now the offensive line coach down there at the U, he took over as the head coach.
Yep.
And I believe by 2013, they were winning the conference.
Did they go Final Four?
Playoffs. And then in 2014, they go to the Final Four.
That's crazy.
So turning it around. And then in the years since that, I mean, shortly after, they're back towards the, just middle of the pack MEC team with some struggles. And, it looks like, at least initially, as much as you can garner from one game against Wesleyan, they seem to be back, up on the rise. I mean, it's tough to tell, obviously playing just one game against a super banged up Wesleyan squad.
I wouldn't take too much into account the score. I think just how you don't take too much into account the score between Notre Dame and West Lib, right? Because that's a compound of issues, like ton of turnovers, banged up team, maybe COVID had some linemen out. Like the score isn't really important in that Wesleyan Concord game. I just think the flashes you see from Bowie, from Marshall, the throws you see from that quarterback, that's going to be a team to watch this fall. And lastly, I think we're going to see in the championship for the MEC, the COVID Cup, if you will. It's going to be played between Notre Dame and UC, I think, right? No matter what happens this weekend.
Yeah, 100%.
I think UC is 3-0 or 4. I think they
3-0.
They both 3-0.
Yeah, UC has beaten us, Pembroke,
and State.
I think they're playing this. I think they're playing their third game this week.
Okay. Well, they're both undefeated, so I think it's going to be between those two schools.
Yeah.
Um,
No disrespect to State, but I expect Charleston to win.
what have you seen on film between those two teams, and who do you think is a little bit stronger, at least this spring, from what you've seen? Obviously, I know
Uh,
you haven't played. You played against Charleston, not against Notre Dame.
yeah.
I think
So I mean, obviously, I'm infinitely more familiar with
with UC.
Charleston, so I'll start with them. They got this running back, number 4, I believe his name's Tyreek McAllister. He's the best skill position player in the league that I've seen so far.
Wow.
Period. He
What
is.
about that receiver from UC who's looking at getting drafted? I think he's a seventh
He,
round projection.
yeah, he's gone. UC is just loaded. There's so much talent down there.
Really?
It's crazy. Y'all. They've had D linemen get drafted. They have one playing. I know he got drafted by the Falcons. I don't know if he's still there or what. Michael Strahan, something like that. Strachan, I think is his name. That's the big, tall receiver, number 1, 6'5", 441.
That's
I mean, he
crazy.
had 200 something yards against us in 2019. So Charleston's always got some studs. Always have, always will. That's a good program down there. Coach Kirkland, Pat Kirkland, does a tremendous job recruiting. If you go on Twitter, you see they're always offering some of the most high-end talents. But as far as where they're at right now, like I said, they got Tyreek McAllister, number 4. All you MEC football junkies, you got to familiarize yourself with him because he's as good as I've seen. Obviously, Jaleel McLaughlin being gone, kind of leaves a void in that best running back in the conference discussion, and I think he's got to be up in there. I mean, without a
Yeah.
doubt, he's a stud. They got a big, tall, long, athletic quarterback who's a very athletic runner. He can push the ball down the field. And then they have another 6'5", super fast, tall receiver wearing number 1. That's not Michael Strachan, whatever. So they're just I don't know. They must have something. I don't know what river. The Kanawha River right there must be just turning guys into mutated freaks. I don't
There's
know what's
something in the
going
water at
on.
Kanawha River.
And maybe Jim Justice is feeding them some HGA. Who knows? But they always have some studs. In all seriousness, I mean, they're defensively they're creative with their fronts and what they do in the secondary. I remember being in the box for that game. I didn't really know, which safety was going to rotate down. They'll give you the signs that it's going to rotate that way, then it goes this way at the last second, and they always have a nose guard, just terrorizing your center the whole game, living in your backfield. They have number 17, a corner for them. I can't remember his name. He just had a pick 6 against UNC Pembroke to kind of ice the game. He had a pick 6 against us in 2019, and he's probably as good of a secondary player as you'll find in the region. Just big on both sides of the ball up front, really big offensive lineman, really big defensive lineman. That's just a solid squad, honestly,
Yeah.
from top to bottom. They have a good kicker. I mean, they're just good. They're just a good football team. And then obviously, you got up there in the north, up there in Euclid, South Euclid, Ohio, the reigning defending champions of the MEC,
Yeah.
the
No
Notre
doubt.
Dame Fighting Falcons. I mean, obviously, they're in 19. The Pioneers were able to come in there and take them down. I don't know how, but we did it.
Great. That was a great win.
you know, I was able to watch. We got the West Liberty versus Notre Dame tape, obviously, and I just kind of watched that, by myself in my office, just as a fan, really, just kind of see what Notre Dame had going on. And they found they still got some good running backs. They
Yeah.
found 2 new running backs. I believe one of them was number 5 and 34. They were cutting up and carving up West Liberty. And West Liberty, like I said before, that's a solid front 7. That's not, West Liberty's not soft up front, So they were carving them up. Um, their quarterback, I believe his name's Chris Brims. He's coming back. I feel like he's been there forever. He's got to be a senior by now. He's going to be a very confident, level-headed type of kid. He's throws a good ball, pretty decently mobile. Just he gets the job done, And then they got a tight end who looks like he was created in a lab. With just 6'7". It looks like he's caught out of diamonds. They're going to have skills everywhere. Defensively, they've gotten a little bit more creative, a little more, aggressive. When we played them in 2019, they kind of tended to stay just kind of in a base look.
Yeah.
Now they're getting more exotic, trying to confuse you more pre-snap. And obviously they got studs there too. So, I mean, honestly, that ought to be a really good game. One thing you've been getting with this COVID season is you've been getting a lot of blowouts.
Yeah.
Normally, you haven't been seeing. I mean, there have been a couple competitive games like us against State and Pembroke, and Charleston was competitive, and maybe a couple others. But I mean, most of them have been just shellackings. I mean, Concord blows out Wesleyan, who,
I think AB got blown out a couple of times.
yeah, AB, and it's just
Frostburg might have had a close game with someone. I can't remember.
Frostburg played a close game with Notre Dame.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins that COVID championship game, if you will. And obviously, all those teams are going to be back in the fall and be just as good. So I think really you're going to see some teams rise up in the MEC and contend with those two teams. But I think, going into the fall, those are the two teams that are going to be the teams to beat, just as far as, what they bring back, experience and overall talent. But it's going to be interesting to see.
One thing I'm kind of curious to see is, the movement that you see after this, because, a lot of these kids obviously have aspirations of playing big time football. So, if some kid at Charleston has an unbelievable spring, I mean, that almost that's great tape that you could put out to try and transfer. So, I mean, I'm like, you said these guys will be back. Maybe they will. This whole transfer culture is just shakes up the box so much. I mean, obviously guys could always transfer, but, I'm not going to talk crap because I transferred twice,
Yeah, the transfer portal, it has its highs and lows. I think it's such an interesting subject because I'm so pro player that I like the transfer portal, but I think also it makes it so tough to keep a kid when you're in a smaller school, in a small state, in a small town. Whenever you find that diamond in the rough and you're the one that recruited them or gave them the best offer or showed them the most love to get them to come. Let's say when I was at Salem coaching and I get a stud to come there, if they have a great year, if they turn out to be the stud that I thought they were and they have a great year, well, now all of a sudden they can go transfer to a small D1, no problem, or a better D2, and you have no way to stop that. And it's like, you don't want to keep a kid there if they're unhappy, but it makes it so much tougher for the small schools to stay competitive with the bigger schools. You know what I mean? Because it just seems like the rich get richer in that regard.
Yep.
In WVU, it's hit them so hard at the D1 level. They just had their best defensive player transfer to UGA. So, I mean, even if you're like a mid-tier Power 5, which let's say that's what WVU is currently, middle of the pack Power 5, middle of the pack and a middle of the pack
upper mid-tier. I'll give you upper mid-tier.
Maybe. I mean, it depends on what your tiers are, but okay, we're in the middle of the pack in the Big 12, which is one of the middle of the pack. I mean, it's not better than the Big 10.
No, W is by no means small potatoes. Though.
It's not small potatoes. I'm saying middle of the
it's
pack.
Like
middle of the pack in the Power 5.
Like in between Alabama and
and Kansas. Whatever. In between Alabama. We're right in the middle of Alabama and Kansas.
There you go.
I'm kidding. Yeah. But I mean, even those schools, right? You lose so many good players. And WVU basketball is going to experience that too a little bit. We had a couple guys in the portal, and it just makes it so tough to take down the Bamas in football, or in WVU's case, to take down Oklahoma when, let's face it, guys are leaving WVU's program that are good, and some of those guys, maybe not from WVU's team, but some of those guys that are good at Power 5s are transferring to Oklahoma. So some of these schools are more recipients of the portal than they are losers to the portal.
Yep.
And I guess that's the same for any MEC school, really. If you're a stud in the MEC, you can darn sure play in a lot of good D2 conferences, but you could play at a small major, a small D1 school. So it's really tough to keep kids like that. But you don't want to keep them if they're not happy.
Well, it's like you said, you're stuck between, because I'm pro player, and people who say, oh, it's bull crap that the coach can, up and leave whenever he wants. I agree. I do agree that, coaches can recruit a kid, sell him on that school, go in, the kid ends up coming to the school and his coach leaves,
Yep.
So like I'm sympathetic to that side of it. But now that I'm here, on the coach's side, trying to build a program, win championships, all that good stuff, you get a guy like let's just be in Neil Brown's shoes here for a moment, okay? Neil Brown, he's got a lot of pressure on him to win. Year one and two, weren't quite, as much winning as West Virginia's used to. But everyone's, his whole thing is, trust the process, or
Trust
what
the
is it?
climb, bro. Trust the climb.
Yeah, trust the climb.
I love
Trust
it.
the climb. Trust the climb. Well, he's coming out here. He's supposed to be relying on Tyke Smith to come back and be a leader on that defensive unit, be the leader of the secondary.
Yep.
He's trying to win games in his head. He's thinking, all right, at the end of 2020, finish whatever record they had. He's thinking, all right, here's what I got to do to get better. All right, here's what we got now. That's good. Bang, 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 bang. Here's what we got that's not good. Here's what we got to do. Okay, so he's making that plan. All of a sudden, he can't. It's like you cannot count on the good that you have to come back 100%. That's always been the case. I mean, guys have always transferred.
Yeah.
No doubt. But it's really like because it's as bad as it's ever been right now. I mean, you get on Twitter, you see it. You can't miss it.
Well, look at the culture, man. Like, kids transfer high schools now. And we'll not use you as an example because you literally moved. But,
yeah,
I mean, especially not as much so in West Virginia. Let's not use West Virginia. Let's use, you're a good basketball player in a more metro area. Some of those kids transfer between high schools like they're in college, like they're being recruited. I mean, dude, people in bigger areas will recruit 8th grade middle schoolers. Like, high school coaches will be there recruiting them. They're just kids. And we live in a transfer culture. We live in where if you're on an AAU team and you're not a starter, you can leave that team and go to the next team and be a starter. It's kids a lot of times don't learn that. And then we already touched on that. You're used to being the man. So kids don't learn that. And eventually there comes a point where you don't have a choice. You have to learn that, right? You can't dance around it. So if you would have just learned that lesson if your parents would have forced you to learn that lesson as a 14 or 15 or 16-year-old or 18-year-old, maybe, it doesn't hit you as hard whenever it happens to you in college or after college.
You're 30. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I mean,
it's so interesting. You talk about culture. People, I see all the time, and it's a fair criticism, because when people complain about kids transferring, it's like, well, if you build a better culture, the kids won't transfer anyways. It's like, yeah, to an extent, but a lot of times, I mean, like you trying to tell me, like the hypothetical person who makes that criticism, are you trying to tell me that Neil Brown is building a bad culture? You mean to tell me that all these guys at all these big time Division I's are building a bad culture? Maybe some of them are, but it's like there's more to it than that. It's a societal top down thing that's happening, like you said, from the time that they're in, peewee sports, youth sports, all the way up through middle school, through high school, and then eventually up until college. Like, because like it's so hard. You're stuck between, because you don't want to sound like you're telling kids not to do what's best for themselves or what they feel is best for themselves, but you're also trying to tell them, to be patient and stick it out. And on some levels, as a coach, let's be honest, when you tell a kid not to transfer, you're saying do what's best for me. And it's so.
But what if it isn't actually best for them to transfer? How do you even communicate that without it looking selfish? Because a lot of times it's not always the best interest to transfer. It's someone in their head from the outside, whether it be a parent or a relative or an uncle or a friend, who's saying, "Oh, bro, you're doing this at a D2 school. You could come. I play at a small D1. You could come play with us." Or I play at the top school in the MEC. You could play here, and not, a lot of times it's not even someone who's in the know of the situation, because kids are so malleable. They're easily influenced, and
it's just they're so easily influenced. It's
our culture, man. It's social media culture.
It's because here's the thing. It's like we all want immediate gratitude for what we do, and I mean
microwave mentality. Have you heard of that? We want it right now. We want it instantly. We want it now.
And like everything in society is like, whether if you're running a business, you want to make as much money as fast as possible, as soon as you can, get it done, need it. Everything's like that. So obviously it's going to bleed into sports, and it's, there's just so many kids obviously getting bad advice, bad guidance. You really start to realize, when you get into college coaching, just how bad youth coaching is. I mean, I don't want to sound bad here, but I mean, the majority of kids getting coached at these lower levels are getting just terrible coaching. I don't want to be hyperbolic with it, but they're not getting those lessons taught that you talk about, and it's just everyone wants that. They want that immediate gratitude so bad. They all want the clout that's associated with Division One. I mean, this whole D1 or bust mentality. Like, these kids get on Twitter and they read like the flippant comments of some anonymous dude in a reply post, to something talking about how crappy, if you don't go to a real college, you suck, this, whatever, all this crazy hyperbolic stuff that when the guy tweets it, he immediately forgets about. But, if I'm some self-conscious 18, 19-year-old kid and I read that and like, oh, well, hell, I need to get out of this situation. I need to be better. I'm better than this. And I don't know. I'm kind of going in circles here on a bit of a tangent, but it's so clear, I guess, if there's anything to take away from this, that people are getting bad advice.
There's ballers at every level, man. Just point blank. There's ballers at every. I promise you that there are guys that are backups on a D1 that wouldn't start for some of the best D3s. Like, that's just facts. I mean, there's guys. Would you rather be the third string at a D1 school, a mid-major D1 that's not even good, or would you rather be, a starter at a solid D2? I mean, it's really about what's best for you, but it's the hashtag D1 or bust, man. That's a perfect model for our society right now. We want the social media cloud, and it doesn't matter if I'm going to go to D1, if I'm going to go to Marshall and never play a single snap, or I could go to Fairmont and be a starter for 2 or 3 seasons. Like, as long as I get the social media post, it's saying as long as I can put it in my bio that I'm D1, right? And I think
it's honest to God, the truth there. I mean, I can't, maybe I'm a little cynical, but like, when you're recruiting these in-state kids, like this, really, you got an in-state guy who's really good. He'd be a great Division II running back. And WVU rolls in and gives him a preferred walk-on, and he snatches it right up. I'm thinking, dude.
The dreaded PWO.
We were going to, I'm in my head, I'm like, dude, we were going to give you a full scholarship. You're going to get a free education at us right away. All right. And listen, like I said, I don't want to, I think you should believe in yourself as a young man. But at what point does a person have to be realistic and think, okay, I'm this guy, I went to this small, podunk school, and I was able to get a full ride to a Division II. And I got PWO to this Division One. I'd like to go to Division One, but I need to do its best. I need to get this free education. I don't know. Every dude's different. Every dude's different. That's what makes this so hard.
For sure.
I think for me to definitively tell kids that to follow their dreams, because what happens is they point to the Baker Mayfields, be like, well, he made it. Why can't I? What they don't see are the thousands and thousands and thousands of guys that just walk on at WVU. Realize after 2 years that they're just a walking practice dummy and end up quitting or, transferring to Fairmont State anyways. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, not even naming names, but like, we personally know several people like that. And not just at WVU, but, Marshall or any other D1 school. And it's interesting, but everyone's got to make their own decisions. And I think that's what keeps college coaching interesting and college athletics, Yeah. It's a grind, It's a chess match, and I guess another good thing about it is no matter what, if you miss out on one, there's 10 more waiting. So you just keep going.
The show goes on.
The show goes on, man. That show goes on.
Go on. Like I said, the train keeps on rolling now.
Train's gonna keep going. I think for me, I guess the final thing, and I guess we're going way over time here, but it's fine because we're chilling. We're in the cut. The final thing, man, and all this has been a culmination of that, but so many people are clueless as to what goes on in D2 or NAIA or whatever of the talent in those divisions. I mean, there are some, I'll just a random example. There are so many dudes that go pro from JUCO baseball. There's so many D1 JUCO football players. If anyone's ever watched Last Chance U, you see EMCC or you see NDU, those schools are loaded with D1 talent, right? And that's JUCO. So then you look at NAIA and D2, there's so many studs, so many guys that were absolute dogs in high school. And maybe they just weren't quite big enough out of high school, or maybe they weren't qualified to make it to D1 or whatever it is. People think that just because you're D1, you're better than a guy that's D2. And a good example we talked about before is a guy like Bajan, the quarterback over at Shepherd, And, a guy like that, I mean, he's clearly good enough. He could play for many smaller D1s, at minimum. But even then, he could be on WVU's roster, surely. Or Marshall.
Oh.
I mean, not to disrespect anyone in those quarterback rooms, won't say any names. Bajent could definitely be on Marshall or WVU's roster and compete for the job. I'm not saying he would start. I think he would probably start at Marshall. Different discussion. But he could easily be a D1 player. And
yeah, I mean, heck, even
Shepherd.
One of my old teammates at Lenore Ryan is the ultimate testament to that. If you can ball, they will find you. Kyle Duggar was, when he was in high school, he was, lanky, skinny kid, could run, obviously. I mean, you don't get offered a scholarship if you got nothing.
Did he have any D1
Lenore
offers?
Ryan, no, he did not. He had no Division I offers. So he goes to Lenore Ryan, red shirts that first year, living in the weight room, doing all the things he's got to do. He starts getting jacked up. He starts getting a good body. He starts, becoming a better player. His first red shirt freshman year, he comes off, is like freshman player of the year right off the bat. One of the best players in the conference immediately like that. He gets hurt his sophomore year, comes back his red shirt junior year, and is, a stud again. And at any point, he could have left and probably got scholarship at least like a UNC Charlotte, which was just right down the road.
For sure.
Or, maybe taking his chances at a Chapel Hill, but he stuck through because he felt like, he had what he wanted at Lenore Ryan. It was a good academic school. He was on full scholarship. He was, he ended up getting drafted in the second round anyways, like early second round by the Patriots, Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick was not worried about Kyle Duggar playing Division II athletics.
No.
All right. So if D2 is good enough for Bill Belichick, then God dang it, it's good enough for me. It's good enough for you. All right. So all you people on your high horse talking down about these lower levels of football, just know it's good enough for Belichick. All right. I don't know what he knows, but he knows a little something, at least a little something. And
I mean, look at The Last Dance, the Jordan documentary, when they showed Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman. They both played at NAIA schools, and that was in they were in college in like the late '80s.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
Jerry Rice went to a FCS school.
FCS,
and we can go all day. Yeah, we can go all day
long. I mean, Jimmy Butler started off at Tyler Junior College. He played he played JUCO.
Yep.
And so I mean, if Jimmy Butler,
it's almost like these small, like we think about it, really these small school guys are really disproportionately represented when they get to the next level. You understand what I'm saying there? There's, I mean, how many just random mid-major basketball schools are producing? I mean, you got your Dame Lillards, your
CJ McCollum, Kawhi Leonard. All those guys did not play in a Power 5 conference, and those are three of the best players in the league.
Stephen Curry. I mean, geez, always.
Steph Curry played at Davidson, the greatest shooter to ever live, to ever shoot a basketball, played at Davidson.
Yeah, and you could get even smaller. I mean, it's just, it's just, I don't know, this whole D1 or bust, it's hurting us because, even our basketball team, our top 3 leading scorers are all leaving. And it's like, oh, come on, guys. I mean, maybe them averaging 16 points a game at Glenville will get, Campbell to pull the trigger and give him a scholarship. But it's like, is Campbell really that much of a step up from
Right. I
MEC
mean, some of
basketball.
these D2s are better than D1s. Like Northwest Missouri State brutalized everyone on their way to a national title this year in basketball. I promise you, they would bury some D1 schools, absolutely bury. And it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of D2s play D1s in the beginning of the season. There was a D3 that beat a D1 in the beginning of this season. I mean, it's the level of a small D1 and a good D2 or good D3 or good NAIA. It's the same level. It's just that guy might have been a little bit taller in high school or maybe a little bit better vertical, but like like you said before, if you're good enough, they're gonna find you. In the movie Field of Dreams, they said if you build it, they'll come. So
Yep. Yep.
if you build your game up enough, like people are gonna come see you. People are gonna find you.
That's a
Uh,
great quote right there. That's one old dad loves to drink to drag out. If you build it, they will come.
and I know that's how that field was built over in Glen Vegas. Uh,
Oh yeah. I built it and the people have come, you know.
oh, brother, that's funny. Man, we've really exhausted it, honestly. Like, I imagine people won't listen this far, but I've had a darn good time making it, and I appreciate you for coming on. And
Oh
obviously,
yeah.
good luck this weekend. And I know we'll make something in the future for sure.
Oh,
We'll
100%.
at absolute minimum, we'll have to have you run down the preseason in the fall for MEC and give me the rundown.
Oh, I'll be happy to. I'll be happy to.
Appreciate you, man. Have a good one, and good luck this weekend, man. Go get you a
Hey, thank
W.
you.
Go put one in the win column.
Absolutely. I was happy to come out here, give you on an episode here of Alecgory, you know.
Yes, sir. I love it.
Clever name from a clever guy.
Thank you,
Uh
sir.
you know, I love it. I love to be back. Thanks for having me, man. You know, go Pioneers and all that good stuff.
Go Pioneers, baby.